and services overseas, and then oftentimes, then passed on to the American consumer. Um, you can see the tariff revenue is starting to come in. And so this is a chart. This is the monthly receipts of tariffs in the billions going back to 2011 or 12. And you can see that it was pretty consistent, a couple $1 billion a month that we brought in. During Trump's first term, he imposed some tariffs. You saw a spike, remained relatively flat. That dip here was during COVID when nobody was buying anything for a few months, but relatively flat even through the Biden administration, pretty consistent from like 2019 through 2024, and then a big surge this year, right? And we've seen, 5x increase from, or maybe 4x, from like 6 or 7 to 26, 27 billion dollars in tariff receipts. What was interesting about that is this past weekend, it was announced that we had a positive budget or a budget surplus in June for the first time in 9 years. Did anyone else see that on the news? I'm curious to see if you guys saw those headlines. Anybody see that over the weekend? Okay, some hands up and some yeses in the chat. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys an analogy. Okay, I want to make this a group participation exercise. So, does anyone have a child, children, or has had a child or children that has played travel sports? Baseball, volleyball, soccer, cheerleading. Okay, so give me some yeses because I can't see everybody as I'm sharing the screen. Okay, and if you're willing to divulge how much these travel sports organizations charge your children, I will volunteer how much I pay for my daughter's cheerleading. But anyone want to throw a number out, like how much it costs per month? And I'll get to a point here in a second. But
So I'm in travel tennis right now, so something
okay,
different that you didn't throw out there. And monthly, we're paying about 450 a month just
yeah, it ain't cheap, right?
for tennis. So yeah.
So we got volleyball, we got Jennifer, small fortune. I think that's very accurate. Okay, so here's my analogy, all right? So gymnastics, wow, I'm glad we're in cheerleading, not gymnastics, Brent. So here's the analogy, okay, and this how it ties to the budget. So I get my American Express bill the other day, and I'm going through it, and we're doing the kind of the family budget coming to Jesus talk. And I look, and it's Top Gun Athletics, $470. So my daughter cheers for a gym called Top Gun. She's on like the world's team or, whatever. Um, so $470, right? Stupid expensive on top of all the other travel and stuff, right? But I noticed we were charged twice on one American Express bill. And my credit card bill runs from like the 3rd of, let's say, June to the 2nd of July or something like that, right? It's not exactly the first through the end of the month. It is a couple day overlap. I noticed we were charged twice. I'm like, what the heck? Freaking $470 times two is 800 and no, $940. There's no way we paid $940 for my daughter's cheerleading. That is craziness, right? Well, what happened, right? The billing cycles overlapped. So bad news for me is that I was billed $940 for cheerleading in June. The good news is what's my July bill going to be?
Zero.
Anybody know? It's going to be zero, right? And so it's going to even itself out. Okay. And so I mention that because one, all of us who have kids that we've funded their sporting and cheerleading and gymnastics adventures, can share some pain today on a Monday morning. But two is that budgets on a monthly basis aren't always consistent. And sometimes you have 2 months worth of expenses hit one month and zero the next. And so before we all celebrate, and we should celebrate that we had a budget surplus for the first time in 9 years and really hasn't been consistently done since the mid 90s. So that's a good thing. We should celebrate it, but we should also pump the brakes and see is there staying power? Okay. Um, Now, even better news for me, and I'm sure some of you that have kids that play sports can relate. There was another charge from Top Gun that was like $340 in the same month. And I
Uniforms.
go to Jacqueline. I'm like, what do you say, Duva?
Uniforms.
Uniforms, yes. Like, honey, what the heck is this? Like, I got double banged on 470 times two. I can at least figure that is, but what's this 340 bucks or whatever? Uniforms, right? Thankfully, uniforms are Todd's retirement funds, yes. Thankfully, uniforms is a one-time expense, but is there going to be another one-time expense for cheerleading throughout the next 11 months? Probably, right? Maybe it's a travel to an event. Maybe it's a hotel. Maybe it's a second set of uniforms because in February we need new uniforms for the new competition. The point is, it's always going to be something. It's not necessarily every month, not necessarily every quarter, but stuff's going to pop up. And I use this kind of, fun kid sports analogy because celebrate that we have a positive surplus in the budget, not a deficit, but let's watch what happens over the next few months because an increase in tariffs is certainly not enough to make up for what's been $100 billion a month budget deficit. And so you can look and see some prior years, just like June of last year, 71 billion deficit. We had a surplus this year. That gap, that $97 billion between last June's deficit and this June's surplus is not attributable to tariffs because we saw last month's tariff incoming revenue was like 26 or 27 billion. So, good news, yes. Is it a major celebration? Probably not. I would imagine that the July number is probably going to be pretty ugly because there's going to be some bills that hit in July that didn't hit in June. But it's still big picture. It's something that we should be happy about. Um, okay. Um, I mentioned the surplus and the deficit because that can affect inflation. And a lot of the initial fears of tariffs were that they were inflationary. They were going to raise the cost of goods and services to the American consumer. Therefore, they were going to increase inflation. Therefore, interest rates were going to increase. Okay. And so it's a good sign that the market shrugged off the kind of tariff negotiation and public threat of 25 countries last weekend, and it's a good sign that we had a budget surplus, even though we don't feel like it's going to be sustainable. It's still a small win. And the $1 trillion deficits we've been running for many, many years now, we need every small win we can get. Um, okay. Um, One of the reasons why I think that you're not seeing inflation at the consumer level related to tariffs is the American consumer is in a difficult position and has been since really post COVID. During COVID, rates went to zero, things got cheap, people spent money, and then inflation spiked and rates went up, and everything became more expensive over the last couple of years. And the American consumer, not all levels, not every income bracket, but a big portion of the country is really just kind of hanging on by a thread. And you can see that in the form of increased delinquency rates. And you can see just this year. So this yellow line here, this is charge-offs. Um, and so you've seen like an increase in credit card collections, charge-offs that's gone from in 2021, like 2% of all credit cards up to close to 6% now are hitting like a collection charge-off stage. And then the blue and the green line and 30, 60, 90-day delinquencies are increasing. And so these higher cost of goods and services have impacted the American consumer for the last couple of years. Just look at early 2021 when things were bottoming out on all of these charts. Since then, all of these levels, 30, 60, 90-day credit card delinquencies and collections have all increased over the past couple of years. And that's specifically related to inflation, increased cost of goods and services, higher interest rates, higher credit card rates, higher default rates. And so the American consumer is having a hard time. What segment of the public do you feel like more of these default rates are attributable to? And I want to get kind of an answer in the chat if you guys don't mind. So um, let's say Gen Y, millennials, Gen X, boomers. What age group of people do you think you're seeing higher default rates? Younger, middle age, or older? What's everybody think? Curious to get some opinions here. So middle, older. interesting that we've got some different opinions. So I feel like, we've got all of the answers. So I'll give you guys my opinion. I feel like um, boomers are probably a smaller percentage because they've got a longer track record of earning, a longer track record of saving. Younger people, so like even younger than millennials, I'm not sure if they've hit peak spending years where they've accumulated credit card debt. Um, I think it's the people in the middle. I think it's the people in the middle that hit those peak earning years pre and post COVID. They started spending money, but the incomes have flattened, but the
Hmm.
cost of goods and services have gone up. And so I think that's who's feeling it the most, maybe people between the age of 30 and 50 years old. And I think that's a reason why the average age of the first time home buyer has increased from the low 30s, 32, 33, to the high 30s, 37, 38, 39, because the cost of goods and services. I feel like that group is feeling the pinch more. Um, you talk about move up buyers, and some people, yes, they're kind of trapped in their existing house because they've got super low interest rates, but move up buyers might be less apt to move up because they're feeling a financial pinch. So um, I think this is something for us to be mindful of. I know our average loan amount has gone up pretty significantly over the last not 5 years since COVID, but really the last 2 years. And it's not because home prices are elevating, it's because the average price of the range that homes are transacting is going up. The lower end of the spectrum that might be more impacted by credit card debt and delinquencies, and now their credit score is impacted. That first home buyer typical range, in Orlando where I'm at, 250 to 400 isn't moving as fast, isn't as robust as it typically would be because that group is feeling this pain more. Um, at the same time, you're seeing some business weakness as well. So these are bankruptcy filings, and this is year to date. So through June, the first half of the year, this is the blue piece of this graph. Um, and this is the number of bankruptcy filings year by year going back to 2010. You'll notice that this year there's more bankruptcy filings through June since 2010. And so we're talking post-crash financial crisis recovery. And so I think you're seeing weakness on the consumer side. You're seeing weakness on the business side. Um, and I mentioned all of that, and let me pull up the charts and graphs here. And I'm going to pull up, so every one of us should have people that we go to for information. And I feel like we should all go to people for information, but use the information we gather to formulate our own opinions. One of the sources that I like and I trust and I followed for a long time is a guy named Barry Habib. Um, and Barry's with MBS Highway, and some of you guys have probably seen him speak. And he's a guy that I follow for a long time. Housing Wire is a great news source. And then honestly, NAR and Freddie Mac, their economists are really good sources. But I'm gonna pull up Barry's update from Friday because he did a really nice job of explaining the battle between Trump and Jerome Powell, which has played out in the public. Trump wants rates to be lower. Jerome Powell wants to delay cutting interest rates. And I'm not going to read this, but I'm going to kind of summarize. And let me see, this looks like this might be, that's today's update. So let me get to Friday's. Um, okay, so in the past, the Federal Reserve has operated looking in the rear view mirror. And what I mean by that is coming out of COVID, when inflation was very low, the Fed did not hike the Fed funds rate early enough because they were looking in the rearview mirror. And in the rearview mirror, what did it say? It said inflation was low. Okay. And the Fed kept saying inflation's low. Chairman Powell used the term transitory or temporary, meaning that inflation wasn't likely to persist long term. And so he kept interest rates low even though there were some signs, if we looked forward, that inflation might be coming, but it hadn't shown up in the rear mirror of the numbers. And so Chairman Powell of the Fed took a lot of heat, and I think rightfully so, that he was late to the game. He was late to hike interest rates in 2021 when inflation looked like we could see it in the front of the front of the car, not in the rear view mirror. And so he was late. Now, what the Fed's doing, and I think why there's some, battle between the president and Chairman Powell, is now they're looking forward versus backwards. If the Fed was looking backwards, they probably would be cutting the Fed funds rate because inflation has cooled, unemployment has ticked up. There's signs of economic weakness, like I shared with the credit card delinquencies and business bankruptcy filings. And so, if we're looking forward, the Fed would probably cut. And the Fed was looking forward in the fall when they cut rates a point, 100 basis points. They cut a 0.5% in September, a 1/4% in November, and a 1/4% in December. And the Fed was looking forward back then. And I'm sorry, looking backwards at the data. So the Fed is kind of changing how they're operating. And I think the reason why they're changing is Chairman Powell looking in the rearview mirror before did not serve him well in 2021. He got caught not projecting forward. And I think now, rightfully so, he is looking forward. That's probably why they're not cutting interest rates and they're delaying things. But that's kind of the internal battle that's happening. Um, and if you guys have read this while I'm talking, Barry Habib kind of summarizes this. Now, what's very interesting is President Trump, who is applying pressure to Chairman Powell to lower interest rates, has talked about nominating Chairman Powell's successor before his term is due. They're in the media, they're calling it a shadow Fed chairman, meaning that if we know who the next Fed chairman is going to be and what kind of policy positions that they would, let me see if I can get whoever's muted here real quick, guys. I got some background noise.
I knew she was gonna be late, but I said.
Okay. Oh, I think they got themselves muted. Cool. So if the president nominates a successor to Chairman Powell, and that person might have different policy opinions, then the market will probably react in advance of a new Fed chair taking over. There's a lot of talk that Christopher Waller, so Fed Governor Waller here, there's a lot of talk that he might be Trump's choice as the next Fed chair. If Trump announces that over the next few months in advance of Chairman Powell's term being up, which is next May, the market might react to the news of a new Fed chairman that might be considered more dovish or more likely to cut rates. Um, and Fed Governor Waller is actually advocating for a Fed rate cut at the July meeting. So that'll be something really interesting to watch is if Trump announces a successor, what that person's opinions are, the market will react to that almost immediately, well in advance of the news. So you may not get a Fed rate cut in September, but if a new Fed chair is announced in September, even if it's 7 or 8 months before they would take office, and if they advocate for cuts, the market would almost view it like a cut. So something really interesting for us to watch. All right. And then what's on tap this week? So, economic calendar, the big news of the day, consumer price index, that's tomorrow. The producer price index as Wednesday. Those are measures of inflation. So, this will certainly be a market mover. I think you're going to see inflation tick up a hair. And the reason for that is inflation is measured on a monthly basis. And the way they get the annual inflation numbers is they take the last 12 months and they add them up. So the June 2020 floor inflation reading was very moderate. It was 0.1%. If we get a July reading of zero point 0.2, which would still be good and still trending in the right direction, it would actually increase the headline consumer price index 0.1%. So I think what you're probably going to see tomorrow is news that inflation ticked up an eighth of a percent year over year. That's really only because this June replaces last June, which was very moderate. I think you'll have different media outlets spinning it the way they want the news to be spun. Um, I think it's not really good news one way or the other, like good news that inflation's cooling, bad news that inflation's going up. I think it's kind of a sign that things are kind of consistent. We're not really moving forward or backwards, but I think you'll see the headline inflation number actually tick up a little bit tomorrow. Um, the market has had a little bit of a weakness over the last week or so. I'll pull the chart up here and share this so you can see that the bond market has sold off just a little bit here over the past week after a really good rally. You can see that these lines here, these are called support levels, are starting to hold. It'll be interesting to see what happens. If inflation is zero point 0.1 or zero point 0.2, you'll see rates probably flat. If it's zero point 0.1, probably improve a little bit higher than expectations, interest rates could sell off and you could see rates tick up an eighth or a quarter of a percent. So we all know that mortgage purchase activity and real estate transactions are very interest rate dependent right now. In a week where rates go down, more contracts are written. In a week that rates go up, fewer contracts are written. So this will have an impact on the number of contracts we write in the next 2 weeks. So make sure you guys are tuning in tomorrow at 8:30. That'll certainly be big news. Um, Okay, and I think that's everything on the charts and graphs. Yep, I cover those. All right, guys. Well, it's about 10:30. We'll get you off a couple minutes early today. As always, we appreciate you guys jumping on. If you would like any of these charts and graphs, email whoever you work with on our team here at CCM. Let us know. We will get these in your hands. And last thing I'll leave you guys with, talk to a real estate broker on Friday and they talked about needing some education or information at their office meetings. Not everybody does those anymore, but um, if you have a team or if you're part of a brokerage, if you need anyone to come teach, educate, share market information with your group, just let us know. We'd be happy to come in and do these in person for your team. So if that's something you think like would be valuable, or if you want to invite coworkers to this call, this is wide open invite. Everyone's invited, so no limit on the number of attendees. But just keep that in mind. If you feel like this kind of information is something that coworkers would like to join this call, or you'd like for us to come in and do it in an office, we're happy to do that. So with that, everybody, have a great day. Have a great week. We will see you guys next Monday. And if you guys, again, if you need any of the data we shared today, just reach out to whoever you work with on our team, and we will get it in your hands. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.